Hello, everyone. Welcome back to a new episode of the RCV Roundtable with Austin.
And Nikita. Thanks so much, everybody, for tuning into our last episode about Maine's history with RCV with the lovely Diane Russell, who gave us an amazing insight into the fight for ranked choice voting in Maine.
Yes, and now we can finally announce our winner of our tote bag contest. Please give me a drum roll.
All right, our lucky audience member is Joshua Barker from Maryland. The thing that he is most excited about for ranked choice voting is that third party candidates will be more viable. And of course, we will be reaching out soon to give you your free tote bag.
Yeah, thanks for participating, everyone. But yeah, we're gonna be continuing our focus in these next episodes on successful states that have implemented ranked choice voting. And today we will be highlighting the RCV campaign in Alaska to further understand how ranked choice voting has truly turned into a national movement.
So to really understand the history of ranked choice voting in Alaska, we have to go all the way back in 2002. In that election year, the Alaska Automatic Runoff Voting Initiative, also known as Measure 1, was voted on August 27th. And it was an indirect initiated state statute, which is a citizen-led ballot measure that is first presented to the state legislature before being placed on a ballot. And Measure 1 would have established a preferential voting system, also known as ranked choice voting, but unfortunately, the measure did not pass with 63.7% voting against.
Fast forward 18 years to the 2020 general election, and voters had another chance to vote on ranked choice voting. With ballot measure 2, it would have established a nonpartisan pick one primary, replacing the partisan primaries with an open top four primary where all candidates, regardless of party, would run, and you pick your favorite to go on to the general, and the top four would advance. And so this would have applied to the state executive, state legislative, and congressional offices. It also created ranked choice voting for the general elections, including the presidential election. And it also included provisions to further reform campaign finance and make it more transparent. And that it did so by requiring groups who are campaigning on behalf of or against candidates, but not ballot measures, to disclose if most of their funding came from a source outside of Alaska.
And Measure 2 had a wide range of bipartisan support from independents such as Speaker of the Alaskan State House, Bryce Edgman, as well as the Alaskan Libertarian Party. Alaskans passed ballot measure 2, shifting the state to the new voting system. It passed narrowly with 50.55% of Alaskans voting yes and a margin of 3,781 votes. This is why we say every vote genuinely does count. The 2020 ballots were hand counted and the election results were confirmed during an audit ordered by the lieutenant governor in December of 2020.
And since then, three incumbents, all with different political ideologies, have won re-election to three statewide offices in 2022 through ranked choice voting, such as Governor Mike Dunleavy, a more conservative Republican, prominent Senator Lisa Murkowski, a very moderate Republican, and then also Representative Mary Peltola, the first Democrat from Alaska in nearly 50 years. So ranked choice voting has truly allowed Alaskans more choice and more voice with their ballots, and has resulted in a wide range of politicians that we see coming from Alaska.
To get to know the history of ranked choice voting firsthand, we have a very special guest with us on the podcast. Jason Grenn is a fourth generation Alaskan who was born and raised in Anchorage, Alaska. He served as an independent state representative in the Alaskan State House, representing the 22nd District from 2017 to 2019.
Yeah, and in the state legislature, he passed legislation focused on legislative ethics reform and championed economic development reforms for Alaska. And most recently, he worked as the executive director for Alaskans for Better Elections, the election reform advocacy nonprofit that worked to get RCV passed in Alaska back in 2020.
So, thank you so much, Jason, for joining us on the podcast episode today. And we are so excited to have you on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Really excited to chat and share what's going on in Alaska and share what other places can learn from our state about ranked choice voting and why it's really great for voters.
Yeah, okay, let's just jump straight into it. So as a former state representative and advocate for ranked choice voting, what were the key factors that convinced you that ranked choice voting was the right choice for Alaska's electoral system?
Well, when I served in the state house, I ran as a nonpartisan candidate and then won and had to figure out kind of my way without having a party. And I got to talk to voters about what that was like, that experience, the pros and the cons, the good and the bad. But really, it gave me that front row seat, really, of what our old election system in Alaska, which was closed primaries, just pick one person and you have to pick a ballot. And then in the general election, you kind of have to, if you don't like any of the candidates, too bad for you. And it really gave me some really great insight on talking to both elected officials who I served and other candidates and voters that the system wasn't working for them. Sometimes you get a colleague, another elected official going, man, I wish I could vote for that, but if I do, I'll get punished in my primary. Or I'd love to serve as an independent, just like you, but I need the party support. I can't run as an independent. I need to be a Republican or a Democrat in order to win. And then you talk to voters who go, well, I don't really like either choice, but I have to pick one. That's all I have. And I want to vote. I like voting. I know it's important. And so kind of all those different circumstances, I got to kind of understand that our system in Alaska needed to be changed. And so the political environment in Alaska was really ripe for changing the system that reflected what voters wanted. In Alaska, about 60% or more of our registered voters are actually registered as independents. They don't belong to one of the two major parties. And so if that's your philosophy, if that's your mindset as a voter, but then you have to vote for a Republican or a Democrat, well, maybe I like one, or maybe I wish I could vote for an independent, but I don't want to waste my vote. I don't want to spoil my vote. So kind of all these different discussions I got to have with both voters and other elected officials, it kind of got me a little more passionate about a reform that would make sense. Luckily, at that time, there was people who felt that way, just like I did in Alaska. And so people were working on a ballot initiative to change the system in Alaska to an open primary system where the top four people would move on, the top four vote getters would move on to the general election. And in the general election, you got to use ranked choice voting. And in 2020, it passed. In 2022, we used it for the first time, and we're already seeing the benefits of it in Alaska. So it's kind of been a journey, even for myself personally, to understand what ranked choice voting is, its benefits, how it can be used, and how voters want to interact with it. And as a campaign person, people involved with candidates, it takes time for the candidates to learn that too. So so far, really, really great stuff coming from Alaska. It is kind of can be a challenge to change your system and tell voters why it's good for them because it is so different. But I'm a big advocate for it now because we're already seeing the benefits of it for both voters and elected officials. It's been a great journey.
Wow, yeah. I mean, this all sounds like the what we've been hearing from many different organizers as well as elected officials that they just realized that their system was broken, that people want one thing, but clearly the system is pushing them against their wants and needs. And so that's amazing that you were able to kind of identify that gap and take that initiative to get RCV moving forward.
Yeah, obviously it's a big shift because there's not many places, especially at statewide level, that use this system in America. Other countries use it, and you talk to the politicians and the voters and academics and people who have studied those systems in other places. There's a really great conversation I had with someone, a professor from Australia, who Australia uses ranked choice voting in all of theirs. They've used it for, I think, a century now already. But he said, what it does in their elections really is kind of make them boring. Which, I think a lot of people would be okay with some of our elections being boring. They just want to vote for good people. They want to have their vote reflect their values, as opposed to kind of, who can be more extreme or who can be louder or who can run a nastier campaign or anything like that. I think voters across Alaska and I think across America are really ready for candidates who are focused on solutions and ballots that allow voters to kind of have different tastes on their ballot. Maybe you like a Republican, but maybe you also like a moderate Republican. Well, if the only Republican on the ballot is to you is very extreme, what choice do you have to vote for the Republican, even though he doesn't reflect much? So if there was someone more candidates, more options, which ranked choice voting allows for, gives voters more power, and it gives them a better chance to reflect their values. And like I said, in Alaska, you're seeing a lot of people understand that voters have a new power, and they're excited about voting because it actually will reflect what they want out of their elected officials, not just the letter next to their name.
Yeah. Actually, Fair Vote collected some information from Alaska voters after the 2022 elections and found that a majority of Alaskan voters found that their ballot mattered more in that most recent election, especially among Alaskan Native voters. And so I wanted to ask you, like, the adoption of ranked choice voting often requires collaboration between different political parties and stakeholders in states. So how did you build support for RCV and Alaska's landscape? And were there like any unexpected alliances that emerged during this process or unexpected foes as well?
Well, I think, the number one thing about ranked choice voting and kind of this election reform is that it's nonpartisan. It really, truly is. I was a lifelong Republican, and then I became an independent voter back in 2016. I would talk to Democrats who were a fan of the system, other Republicans, other independents, and across Alaska. Again, as I mentioned, a very high percentage of nonpartisan registered voters. They wanted a system that would reflect that, and so you could go to different groups and say, "Hey, this isn't going to be a trick to vote in more Democrats or some sort of scheme to get in more Republicans. This is really about bringing power to voters." And so with that message, we went across the state to all sorts of different groups and organizations. You could speak in front of a Rotary group in a big city like Anchorage, or you could talk to the elders in a small village outside of the road system in rural Alaska and have the same message that this is about bringing power to voters, giving them more choices, giving them more options, and giving them a chance to reflect their values. And so during the campaign, when this was just a ballot initiative, we had a group. So our group was called Alaskans for Better Elections. Well, we had Alaskan Natives for Better Elections. We have fishermen for better elections. We had different groups who were just interested in better elections. It wasn't Republicans for better elections or Democrats. It was really just different groups of Alaskans who wanted to change the system that would give them a better reflection and more power in their vote. And so it was really, really, really neat, actually, to kind of work in different groups like the Alaskan Native community around the state, or groups that maybe had felt unheard in the past or unrepresented in the past, because they knew that if there was more candidates on a ballot, there's more chance that someone would align with their values or look like them, as opposed to just the red or the D on the ballot, and you have to just pick one. And so this was an opportunity for a lot of groups to feel like they could have someone who would fight for them and their values, or maybe give them a chance to be better represented in our system. So in some ways, it was really easy, because you could talk to many different groups about this and say, hey, again, you're in the business community, or you're in academics, or you're a fisherman, or whatever it is. You can talk about how this was going to work for them and their audience. And so it was really quite fun to go across the state talking to different groups about this, because you didn't have to feel like, well, if we go to this place, this community, we can only talk to this side, or these are the people, like some ballot initiatives, you can only talk, you got to get your voters out, but this was for everyone. This was for every Alaskan. And so as a lifelong Alaskan myself, I could really kind of talk to people about that, going, this is for our future. This isn't about, making one side or one organization, more powerful. This is really about Alaskan voters and the future. So we really, this was a lot of grassroots work and a lot of work with different community groups, not just one singular focus. And I think because of our nonpartisan message, that really resonated with a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, you put it both beautifully, and you kind of answered one of our questions, and I would love for you to get a little bit more into that, with just, exactly what you said. Alaska is known for their vast geographic expanse and diverse Indigenous communities. And so how were Alaskans able to ensure that, the benefits and mechanics of ranked choice voting were effectively communicated even before, the ballot initiative and everything took in action, and as well after? And so, like, what were the strategies that were used to effectively communicate to these different populations? Because, like you said, you could be a fisherman, you could be Alaskan Native, you could be a businessman, but you still have to be able to talk to all these different people, and especially with a focus on Alaskans' Indigenous communities.
Yeah, that's a great question. And as the white guy from Anchorage, from the big city in Anchorage, I'm not the best messenger talking to different groups and different communities around the state. Totally recognize that. You want to meet people where they are. You want people to feel like there's an authentic voice and someone who does understand this, who's not just the person from the big city of Anchorage, or who doesn't really understand at a good level, the culture or their history or what they're concerned about. And so we worked with a lot of different groups, a lot of different community leaders to share the story about why this election reform was important, share the benefits of that, and then really utilize different, like I said, community leaders, respected people in the community, different elders in those groups, to really kind of be the lead on talking about and meeting people exactly where they are and talk about this, because you want an authentic voice. You want people to realize, understand, like, this is again, this is not about Jason and his view and what he wants, but this is about Alaska and what we can do. And we all have different priorities. We have different history and context of why we vote a certain way. And so it did take a lot of work meeting with different groups and leaders. But I think, again, coming at it from an authentic place, with really just with real data, with real examples of why this can work, and really kind of showing, like, if this was in place, what could we be doing differently? How could this impact your community, and how could this impact those who are elected to represent your area? Would it be different? How could it have benefited you in the past, and how can it benefit you in the future? And so finding those authentic that authentic message, finding those leaders who were respected and well known in different communities. That was really, really important, because we wanted this to be something that was led from all sorts of different aspects and perspectives from Alaskans, not just a couple of random people in Anchorage who might not be seen as having your best interest, or might be telling the whole story. And so we really did focus on putting together a broad spectrum of people across the state, across ideologies, across all sorts of different spectrums, to really, share that voice. And then once the ballot measure passed and we knew that this was going to be the law of the land, we worked with, pretty much any group that had an audience. We worked with groups of, those who interact with English as a second language voters, homeless people who advocate for homelessness and want to make sure that they know they can vote and how to vote. Different, like, everything from, like, your Rotary groups and Chamber of Commerce's to those who are experiencing disabilities, meeting in front of them. So any group who had voters in their audience, we tried to get in front of. And we spent 2 years before the first election crisscrossing the state, everything from paid promotion to grassroots work, working with any group that was going to have a voter. We wanted to make sure that they felt confident about this new system. So, in 2021 alone, I gave 300 presentations across the state, some on Zoom, some traveling around, but it was, 2 times a day or 4 times a week, giving different presentations, because we really wanted to make sure that voters felt confident about this new system, wanted to use it to their advantage, and felt like this wasn't about just this cycle that they were going to be using it, but the next cycle as well, and to give them a good experience so they understand the benefits, and that they want to use it again.
Yeah, wow. 300 Zoom meetings. That's crazy.
Yeah, Zoom meetings, in person. I'd be in front of a group of 10 people, or I'd be in front of a group of 500 people. Or a Zoom meeting with 50 people, or a Zoom meeting with 3 people. It was, like I said, it was any group that had voters that they interacted with. We wanted to make sure that every Alaskan knew this system and was confident when they voted on election day, that they knew how to use the ballot, and they knew that the benefits of this new system for them.
That's crazy, because I think we've hit like 150 events so far. So maybe Arizona might be able to pass Alaska's assumed record for amount of events in the year. But that's definitely like a lot of support and a lot of education went into talking to voters. But behind that, you definitely do need money and fundraising to be able to do this effort. So I wanted to lead into this question as like other states with voter initiative processes like Alaska look towards to having potential RCV ballot measures, and just overall the cost of supporting ballot measures has gone up in the recently, especially in Arizona. How did Alaskans for Better Elections fundraise and financially support its efforts to get it passed and educate voters?
Yeah, Alaska as a ballot initiative state is definitely less expensive than other markets because of our low population, because of different the media market size, and you can really reach a lot of people at a different cost per different than Arizona or Washington or other states where there's millions of people. Alaska has a population of about 700,000 people. You figure half of those people vote. 60% of people vote. And so now you're talking to 350, 400,000 people. Well, that's smaller than some cities, right? And the big cities in other states. And so, and you can do it in a way too that is focused on, like I just mentioned, all the work that we did. You don't have to put up billboards and run expensive TV ads. You can meet people and meet, other Alaskans where they are, even though you have to fly there since you can't drive to a lot of places in Alaska. But even with that said, the campaign for the ballot measure, it was about $6 or $7 million, not a small task at all. And, that's everything from, gathering signatures to having staff to doing paid promotion and things like that, everything from the legal aspects, but also the, running Facebook ads, things like that. And so, we were lucky enough to find other partner organizations who are very focused on improving and even saving democracy in our country. There's groups, that very familiar to people who are involved with this work. Groups like Unite America, Represent Us, the Institute for Political Innovation. There's all sorts of little groups that are nationwide that, if you have a good idea and you have good momentum and you have, some good strategies, that they want to invest in these things, because it is very important that we preserve, the great systems that we do have in our state and in our country, but really make sure that voters are also the focus and voters have the power. And so, Alaska, we don't have many groups that are focused, nonprofit groups or different, organizations that have the resources that we needed. And so we did have to reach out, across the states to find these more national groups that are involved. And so it's definitely, for Alaska, it's definitely very lucky to be partnering with some of those groups. There's criticism to that. People go, well, why can't you raise the money in state? And if you don't have the money in state, then you don't have the support of Alaskans. And then it looks like it's not, for your state. And I tell people all the time, in Alaska, there's a part of Alaska in our southeast region where it has some of the best surfing in the world. You wouldn't think this, but Alaska is like amazing surfing. You can look it up. Phenomenal surfing. But if you didn't know that, and I was trying to open up a surf store in Alaska, you'd be like, you're a fool. Like, I'm not going to, if I was, raising money to open a business, people wouldn't want to invest in that because they don't really know about that. That sounds crazy. Well, if that's my dream and I believe in it, I'm not going to give up just because I can't raise the money in my own state. I'm going to look elsewhere. I'm going to look for other people who believe in me and believe in the idea and understand how great it could be. And so, that's, just like a venture capitalist would go out and raise money wherever they could from people who are on their side and believe in them and believe in the idea. That's what our group did. We found other groups who are, focused on the same thing we are, improving democracy, giving power to voters, and we were able to raise the money. And so, when other states are going after and fundraising, I definitely, encourage places to, no stone left unturned, really kind of find other places and other groups that have the same belief and values that you do and want to improve our election systems in our state. And, as long as they're people with good intentions and are doing what they do ethically, there's a lot of great individuals and organizations who want to improve election systems in our democracy. And so I give a lot of credit to those organizations, both who are funding and groups that are looking for fundraising, because it is tough.
Yeah, definitely is tough. As somebody, I mean, this is not really anything related to ranked choice voting, but just working in the nonprofit sector, or just having like an idea that you want to spread across. It's very hard to get people to kind of believe in it, and to meet them where they are, like we've been talking about. So just trying to get those resources anywhere you can. And for our next question, you've kind of been answering this as you go. So thank you so much for that. But with, Alaska's experience with ranked choice voting, it does serve as a model for other states looking to reform their own electoral systems. So as you have been doing, what advice would you give to lawmakers, advocates, and other organizers in states who are considering the adoption of ranked choice voting?
Well, one, like I said, this is to me, and my journey through all of this and talking to people and watching this, it really is a nonpartisan effort. It is something that is a voter-focused reform. And I don't, elections are for voters. They're not for parties. They're not for, the individuals who are running. Elections are for voters to express themselves and to share their values of what they see in their community and what they want their future of their city or their state or their country to be. And so anything that kind of puts the power back into voters' hands, I think, is usually a good thing. And so from an elected official standpoint, it's hard sometimes for electeds to get on board with the reforms because they won under whatever system they're running with, they won. And so they know how to win under that system. Consultants and strategists and people, they go, hey, look, we know exactly the playbook. We know how to do this under our current system. Why would we change this? Because then we have to learn everything and all these things. But again, if your mentality is that you want to give voters a stronger voice and a more authentic voice, they should be on board, because that's really, like anything else, if you're trying to improve your city, your state, improving election system and giving voters getting them excited and giving them more power, that's a good thing. That really is a good thing. It also makes your elected officials, I think, listen more and interact more and be a better elected official, because they have to talk to more people now. With ranked choice voting, you can't rely on just your fan base, your number ones. Most likely you're going to need some of those number two choices, maybe even number three choices. And you earn that by talking to more people you might have never talked to in the past. Because if you're running as a Democrat, you probably only have to talk to Democrats and get them excited to vote. And if they vote, you can win. But now you have to talk to maybe some independents, maybe even some moderate Republicans. And you might learn something from them. You might hear more about them, their concerns. And then when you're serving, it gives you an opportunity to really reflect the will of everyone in your district or your state, not just those with the same letter next to your name. And so I think elected officials, say, hey, this is going to make me better. This is going to reflect the values and the needs of the community better. It's also going to give the voters more power and get them excited about this process. They should be on board. From a voter standpoint, again, 90% of Alaskans said that this ballot was simple. It's not confusing. It's not to be intimidated by. It's not. You don't have to play any games. You don't have to worry about spoiler effects. You don't have to worry about wasting your vote. This has all the benefits that you want as a voter. You get to have a backup choice. You've never had a backup choice. I mean, how many times do you probably wish I had someone else I could vote for? Well, now they're going to be on the ballot, hopefully. We tell in Alaska, one of the races, we have a very small state house and state senate, only 40 in our state house and 20 in our state senate, very small chambers. But one of our state house races, the top 4 people who moved on from the primary election were all Republicans. It was a very conservative part of the state, but 4 Republicans moved on. Well, if I'm a Republican voter, I have to now do some research. I have to find out which Republican I'm going to rank first and second and third. And if I'm one of those Republican candidates, how do I stand out? How do I show myself to be the number one or the number two? How do I earn that? So I have to work harder now. And if I'm a Democrat in that race, well, maybe one of the Republicans is more moderate. And now I have a better chance. Of course, a Republican was going to win just because of the sheer numbers in this district. But now I have a chance to really kind of learn more. And maybe there's a moderate who has a chance to win, who maybe isn't my all-time favorite candidate because I vote more progressive, but now I have a chance to really reflect value. So from a voter standpoint, this is all a win-win for voters. And so we really, show people that this is the benefits of this as a voter are really, really phenomenal. And once they use the system, voters tend to see that too. They go, wow, this was simple, very simple to use. And it gave me more power and more choices. what's there to hate? What's there to dislike? It's really quite amazing. And so, as I mentioned, we're already seeing the benefits of this both to voters and our elected officials and to policy outcomes after just one election cycle in Alaska.
Yeah, the policy has been actually really good out of Alaska. I know you guys have some bipartisan coalitions in both your state Senate and your state House of Democrats and Republicans working together in coalitions, and they've passed a lot of bipartisan legislation. So we're already seeing like the positive effects of ranked choice voting in Alaska. However, Alaska voters might potentially face a repeal of ranked choice voting, as the anti-RCV group Alaskans for Honest Elections have announced that they've met around 80% of their signature minimum requirements. So what is the strategy going ahead with countering these RCV efforts to make sure that ranked choice voting stays in Alaska?
Well, I've mentioned several times that our efforts both to put it on the ballot, to educate Alaskans, and moving forward has been a nonpartisan effort. If you look at who was on, the leadership of Alaskans for Better Elections and the different groups that we've brought on and worked with, very nonpartisan, very just talking about the facts, talking about the impacts as a voter, talking about the impacts as an elected official, and really kind of, presenting a truthful story in a nonpartisan way. The group that you mentioned, Alaskans for Honest Elections, incredibly partisan. If you look at who's involved with their group and who they're talking about, it's all, more very extreme conservative organizers and people who say things that most common sense Alaskans kind of scratch their head at, go, that doesn't make sense to me, or actually, I know that not to be true. I'd say that particular group is really upset about one race, that, the state house race, the U.S. House race, that actually a Democrat won. They didn't like that outcome. And, for them, this is an attack on a system that, even though Alaskans found it simple, 60% of Alaskans found races to be more competitive than they have in the past, based on all the polling post last election. And as you mentioned, bipartisan work is happening at our state level, good policies that are coming out. Most Alaskans, when presented with the information that I've shared, or even on their own reflection, going, yeah, I actually like that voting. I really truly believe that Alaskans will not vote to repeal the new system. They will be using it again in 2024. Even if a ballot measure to repeal it is on that ballot, they'll be using this system on that ballot again. And I think once you kind of look, wait, I have this system that I'm using for the second time that I did like. Now I have to ask myself, do I want to repeal this and go back to the old system where I had less power, less choices? I think Alaskans, they understand that this new system is a model for a lot of other places, that other places are in some ways jealous of the new Alaska system from a voter standpoint. And I think Alaskans will reject something that's very partisan, that is focused singularly because, one race didn't go a way that one side wanted it to do. Once presented with the facts, once presented with their own reflection of how the system works for them, I think Alaskans are going to reject any sort of repeal to the system. So obviously, a lot of work to be done, and continuing just showing the benefits to voters, educating them on what's factual and what's not. But it's, I'd say from your everyday voter who just wants to vote, wants good stuff to happen out of their state capital. Most voters, a lot of voters, I think, actually like this new system. And as we inch closer to the election cycle in 2024, we'll really understand the benefits and want to keep it.
Yeah, and definitely, like with that group that you were talking about, there's definitely a lot of shady activity going on with them. There was a complaint recently filed that alleged that they formed a church to skirt disclosure laws with fundraising. So definitely one side is engaging in good faith politics, and what other side is definitely engaging in some shady activity to try and move our elections in a regressive way.
Yeah, when it comes to election work, campaigning and fundraising and things like that, we all make mistakes. There's mistakes that get made. Hey, I didn't file something on time, or I forgot to file that. Totally understand. And that's, but when you have groups that are intentionally finding ways and doing things that, don't really pass that red face test, or, you tell someone what they're doing and that just, it smells fishy. And Alaskans are pretty smart, and they can kind of see that for what it is. And I think, again, you have to question the motives. You have to question those behind those actions. If these are just complaints, groups that will investigate it and file reports about what happened. But you always want to. I think when you're involved with politics and involved with the government, you have to go above and beyond to show yourself to be ethical, and above and beyond to show yourself to be honest. Like our group, we put on, all of our disclosures, all of our reports on our website. You could see everything that we had filed, and then links to other groups who gave us money. We put links to their filings, so you could see who's giving them money, not just who's giving us money, but who's giving the groups who are giving us money their money. And so wanted to be incredibly transparent, wanted to be above and beyond with our standards. And I think, again, Alaskans can kind of see through that and understand, who's doing this with good intentions and authenticity for Alaskans, and who isn't.
Yeah, and I would just, want to applaud again. I know earlier you really mentioned a lot about diversity and making sure that we meet people where they are, and especially with making sure that, you talk to all these different groups and all these different organizations, and I think that is another part of like being ethical, of making sure that, we meet people where they are, they understand from their own community members, and that's so important. So again, thank you so much for taking the time to come on to the podcast. Your valuable insight into the journey of ranked choice voting in Alaska and its continuation is sure to help so many other organizers around the country, especially youth like us, who are just starting off and learning the best practices and strategies towards building a cohesive and inclusive ranked choice voting movement in their own states.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And again, groups that are on, first starting, or groups who are halfway through a journey, the outcomes of what ranked choice voting and reforms like this can do, they really can impact the short term and the long term, quality of life, and for everyone in your community and state, and really empower voters. And so I just want to encourage those who are on that journey to keep going. It's definitely worth it. There's tough challenges along the way, but I think, again, as Alaskan can show, it really is worth it, and it really can make a big difference. And sometimes it's hard to see that, but I want to promise people it really is something that can be great for your city, for your state, as we look towards the future. So just keep it up.
Thank you again so much, Jason, for taking the time to come on to the podcast. Your valuable insights into the journey of ranked choice voting in Alaska is sure to help other organizers around the country, especially youth like us, who are just starting to learn the best practices and strategies towards building a cohesive and inclusive ranked choice voting movement in their own states.
All right. Thank you guys so much for listening today. And thank you for constantly tuning in again and again and listening to our growing podcast here at the RCV Roundtable. We're not going to see you in 2 weeks, but in 1 week, we'll see you back here on August 7th, where we're going to discuss Ohio's August 8th special election and its potential impacts on ranked choice voting.
Yeah, we got to catch up on some of these episodes. So expect to see much more of us in the next couple of weeks.
Yes. But yeah, everyone remember, embrace your voice, unlock the choice. Thank you guys.